Welcome to the live after hours Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where your questions get answered by your favorite RCDD Big C technician. Me, yes. So we go put over to the chat. So, I start every Thursday after hours section the exact same way. What are you drinking? What are you drinking? Put it in the comment box. Tell us what you are drinking. I am drinking today, but you probably think it's water. You probably water with a little bit of lemon essential, right? No, it's not. This is ginger ale. Not any ginger ale, though. This is Zevia ginger ale. No, they are not sponsors of the show. If they would like to become sponsors, look me up. This is a sugar-free kind of ginger ale thing. You know me, I've been doing, I almost said Zoom. Keto, that's it. I've been doing keto for about a year now and lost a ton of weight, and I'm breaking my my sugar addiction. So first comment already coming in. This is obviously somebody who knows me. His comment is, Mr. Click is in the room. Would you like to meet him? LOL. Mr. Click is a inside joke between me and George, because sometimes we'll be talking on the phone. He'll start talking crazy stuff, and I'll just say, well, let me introduce you to Mr. Click. And I hang up the phone on. That's Mr. Click. It comes from the old days. So tell us in the chat box, what are you drinking? Yes, what are you drinking? Again, like I said, I'm drinking ginger ale. While you're taking your sip of drink and you're telling us, remember, don't forget to visit our website. That website, you have access to all of our recorded podcasts, all of our recorded vlogs, and all of our articles as well. So this will be recorded, downloaded, and I'll trim it up a little bit, and then I'll put it on YouTube as well, and then it gets posted over to the letstalkcabling.com website. There's also pages there for to meet our expert council. I did some updating to it last night. I had the first two people. I'm waiting for the information for the other people to submit it to me so I can get it on the site. And I'm also working on updating the support page. So there's more than one way to actually support the channel, because some people don't necessarily want to join Patreon. So I also added a PayPal thing where you can do a one-time donation or you can do a monthly donation. If you don't want to do that, I'm also putting on I'm working on pages for my Amazon affiliate link. So I break it down into like different sections. So for example, if you want to see hand tools, now I'm talking about telecommunications hand tools, you click on that and there's going to be a list of tools that I've used and I've got opinions on, stuff like that. And then for example, like one's a pair of snips. You click on the snips, it takes you to an Amazon page. If you buy it, I make a small little commission off that. You don't pay any extra for that tool, but it does help provide support for the channel. So that's not published yet, but it's getting there. I'm working on it still. But like I said, the biggest change this week is we added the expert council. So that was my wife likes to call them your roses. That's my roses. My thorn is the Amazon page. I deleted literally one line of code and it just totally whacked everything out. So I have to go back and fix that. So that's my thorn for the week. Using stealing. I wonder if she's even listening. She's out in the front of the house. She says she heard me. Hey, you're not supposed to be listening. You're not on this vlog. Yeah. So here, let's get off with the first question. Again, remember, put your question in the chat box if you want us to answer it. So the first question comes from Jason in Beaumont, Texas. Never been to Beaumont, but he says, Chuck, I was always taught to dress cables in a neat manner, forming them into nice, neat little bundles. My customer wants me not to do that. They want me to just lay the cables loosely in the tray. Who is right? That's kind of a great question. First off, let's talk about that. That's called cable dressing. And a lot of guys rephrase that. A lot of technicians take a lot of pride in how well they can dress cabling. And it used to be a statement of pride. And I'm one of them. I used to take pictures of my closets when I got done, and I used to have a little portfolio that I used to take with me. I used to show people and show potential customers and show potential employers. It's a statement of pride. So you'll see a lot of this, especially on LinkedIn. A lot of technicians like to post those pictures and look really, really good stuff. Now, so like I said, your cable dressing is really good because most customers equate quality visually with their eyes. So it is aesthetically pleasing. Now, So technically, you both are right to somewhat of a degree. So without actually knowing the exact project here and what kind of equipment and devices you're installing, I'm just going to have to assume that there are some reasons why that customer wants that cable plant randomized. That's what they call it. When you just lay them in a tray, it's called randomization. So first one I'll talk about is alien crosstalk, right? Alien crosstalk, again, just kind of quick review in case there's somebody here who may not have listened to the podcast that I did about EMI. If you want to go to our webpage and look it up, go way in depth. But alien crosstalk is literally how much one cable interferes with another cable as it's going down the cable pathway. Right? That's alien crosstalk. And you also find it at the connector ends. And you'll find it really prevalent in large bundles. That's why you typically want to try to keep your bundles to 24 or 48 cables at the max. Now, alien crosstalk is also going to be more predominant in your higher performing cables. For example, Cat6A, because Cat6A is operating at 500 megahertz. So higher frequencies generate more EMI, electromagnetic interference. You want to learn more about that, the three components, again, visit that podcast that I did. So that way we don't take up too much time tonight talking about EMI. That's your homework assignment. Another reason why the customer might be asking for it to be just randomized is because they might have some power over Ethernet stuff, right? They might have some devices, some lights, some wireless access points and stuff like that. Right now, we can do between 90 and 100 watts of power over a single 4-pair cable. 90 watts. That's enough to basically power up a 60-inch screen TV. So when you send energy down a cable, whether it's a low voltage signal for communications or PoE, as that signal goes through the cable, it actually causes the cable to increase, the heat to increase. And that actually affects cable in a couple of different ways. One, you're going to find that the hotter the cable gets or the hotter the environment, that's going to give you higher insertion loss readings, which could give you a potential fail. But also, you might reach, if you got a bundle of power over Ethernet cables in a bundle, a large bundle, you could also, although those cables heat up together, make that bundle increase, you might get to what's called the auto ignition point of that material, which means basically it would just spontaneously catch on fire. Now, cable manufacturers have gotten wise to power over Ethernet, and they realize that sometimes that some people are going to be doing power over Ethernet stuff. So they're actually constructing cables a little bit differently now than they'd have in the past. So, for example, sometimes you might find some type of a cross-web separator inside of that cable. You might find the pairs a little bit further apart. That's all helped to dissipate the heat. So what they mean by when they put your cables in the cable tray randomized, you're putting space between those cables. So it has room for that heat to dissipate. You don't have, 2 or 3 cables all running next to each other, all, heating each other up. So it might be that as well. When it comes to warranty purposes, some manufacturers will require you to randomize and some won't. You just need to know the manufacturer that you're working with so you know which is the detail for that. But I'd be willing to almost bet you that it is a power over Ethernet issue. So again, the cable construction helps mitigate the heat, and you help mitigate that heat by just laying in there loosely. And here's the thing. A lot of companies have shifted to do the randomization because they save labor on the job site because you're not having to spend a couple hours dressing out those bundle of cables. So some companies have naturally shifted to randomization. Power over Ethernet has become such an issue that it actually was addressed in the 2017 code book, and they also revised it in the 2020 code book. If you go to NEC article 725.144, there's a whole section on which talks about limited power cabling, and it gives us guidance on what size, what it gives us guidance on to be used for power over Ethernet. So make sure that you read and apply those guidelines. That's 725.144 in case you missed that, or you want to write that down. And if you want to know what that actually says, shoot me a direct message on Facebook or shoot me a direct message on LinkedIn or shoot me an email, chuck@letstalkcabling.com. So the next question comes from Tom. Tom is from Boston, Massachusetts. He direct messaged me this one on LinkedIn. And he says, Chuck, I'm installing cables at a church. No matter where I try to drop the cables, I can't get the Fishtape down the wall. It only goes about halfway. What is going on? Please help. Okay, so what you're going to find is in a lot of residential construction and some commercial construction where they use wood frames to build out the walls, you're going to come across this thing called a fire break. So let's say this is a stud and that's a stud. Usually about halfway up, they're going to put another piece of wood going across. So if a fire were to start below it, the fire can't propagate and go above that fire break. So when you send your fish tape out, you're hitting that fire break. Now you're probably thinking, well, all's lost. How am I going to get that? Since I didn't get in here and do this cabling before they close up the walls, how am I going to get this cable down the wall? Pretty simple, actually. What you need to do is you need to go and look and purchase yourself what's called a flexible drill bit. Now, this works really well if you have access to the area above the wall. So if you got like an attic space, or if you have a basement below, you can also drill down if it's blocking you that way. But going down, it shouldn't. Well, actually, no, you get the stud down below, so it's gonna mess you up there too. So you're gonna have to drill down. So, and you can buy these flexible drill bits, right? And it's with extensions. And there's one that Klein Tools has. It's 54 inches long. It's flexible, and it's about $45, $50, somewhere in that range. So if you're drilling, let's say, for example, you're drilling at the from the work area out. You did your cut out at the bottom. You're going to send that drill bit up, and it gets curved, and you go up till you hit that fire break. You can attach it to your drill, and then you're going to go ahead and drill. It's going to drill up through that fire break. But be super careful, because if you put too much pressure, or if it kind of bends backwards, you could have that drill bit kind of coming out of the middle of the wall. Now you're having to patch and paint a wall. You can also drill from the top down, doing the same thing again. That was actually a really big thing for cable TV installers to do, because like I said, a lot of houses are actually built that way. They have fire breaks, and you can drill down with that flexible bit again, but just be careful, because you might drill through a hole in the wall. The next question, and by the way, let's take a pause here for a second. If you have a question, put it in the chat box, so that way we can answer your question. I'm seeing the comments from YouTube, but I don't see any comments from LinkedIn. So somebody who's watching this on LinkedIn, do me a favor, post it something in the chat box. Say hi, put a question in there, just a bunch of letters. That way I know that the chat is working with the LinkedIn, because I see a bunch of stuff coming through on Yahoo, but nothing on LinkedIn. So the next question, moving back over. Randy from Tempe, Arizona. I did a project in Tempe once. It was a Mountain Shadows Marriott. He direct messaged me through LinkedIn. Again, if I'm on LinkedIn, if you look me up and send me a friend request, he asks, how is an IDF different from a TR? Shotzi's here. All right, hey Shotzi. So Shotzi is over there saying hi on YouTube as well. They're the same. An IDF is a TR. TR is an IDF. The only difference is the name. And actually, Shotzi and I were just talking about this, I think. He is one of my Patreon members, and Patreon members get a 30-minute session with me, a Zoom call. Although get me talking about communications, good luck and get me limited to 30 minutes. I think we actually went almost to an hour, actually, enough to where my battery almost died. So an IDF stands for Independent Distribution Frame. It's an old Ma Bell term, and it's been around since I got in this industry. It used to be described, these telecom closets that were literally like 3 feet deep by 5 inches wide, and there's nothing in them but a bunch of termination blocks, usually 66 blocks. You might even find some old 1A2 phone equipment in there as well. So the Ma Bell company, or AT&T, used to call them IDFs, Independent Distribution Frames. Now, the acronym changed from IDFs to TCs, telecom closets, and I don't know why they changed that. I don't know. But then they changed it from telecom closets to telecom rooms, TRs. And I do know why they changed that. Because if you go to an architect who is drawing up the floor plans for your customer, which, by the way, is the stage that you really want to be interacting with that architect, because it's easier to move a wall when it's just a line on a drawing, as opposed to moving a wall when it's built on the job site, because that takes a little more than you got to tear down the old wall. There's costs involved, and it's just a nightmare. So if you tell an architect that you need a telecom room, that implies to that architect, hey, this is not a closet. This is a room. A room. So the standard actually calls for different size rooms depending on how much square footage that they serve. Maybe I'll do an episode on telecom rooms, because if I remember right, I'm going to try to reach back in my TDM brain here. If it serves 10,000 square feet, I think the room's got to be a 10 by 11. And then there's some other sizes as well. And so again, we need a room, not a closet. That's why they changed that acronym. So for new people coming into the industry, when I say new, I mean probably 5 years or less, they're going to hear called a TR, maybe a TC. They may not have heard it called an IDF. Old people like me, and I'm talking about people who got gray in their facial hair. We used to call them IDFs, and I call them TCs and TRs. It just kind of depends on which word comes to my head when I'm talking about it. And also depends on whom I'm talking to. So, for example, if I'm talking to somebody brand new into the industry and they just came out of a Bixby class and they just got their installer 1 certificate or something, I'm going to call it a TR because that's what they were trained to call it, a TR, right? But that's why I think you got to communicate with people where they are at. If I'm communicating with a customer who's an old Ma Bell guy and they used to call it IDFs and they're just kind of stuck in their old ways and they want to continue calling it IDF and they get really irate if you call it anything else other than an IDF, well, then I'm going to call it an IDF because we both know what an IDF is. And it just makes it simpler all the way around, right? I do the conversion in my head. IDF equals TR. It's that simple. So I communicate with people where they are. Never talk down on somebody because sometimes we get so hung up on our acronyms. We'll do that whole, it's not an IDF anymore, you old Ma Bell guy. It's a TR. Yeah, you're gonna lose friends that way. You're gonna lose customers that way. A potential peer, a potential mentor. That person's calling an IDF has been around a while. They know some stuff about the industry, and you want that person on your side. You want that person to teach you. So talk to them however they want to be talked. If they want to call an IDF, you call it IDF too, because you know the difference. Our industry loves acronyms. It really, really does. And I think the only thing it loves more than acronyms, it loves changing acronyms. Because like I said, they changed the acronym for that closet 3 times since I've been in this industry, right? They changed the name of the MDFs, the main distribution frames as well. And when you first come in this industry, it's almost like you have to learn a new language. Side note here, I was in a meeting one time as my brand spanking new project manager. I just got promoted out of the field, and I was going with my boss to meet with a customer. It's actually for Verizon. Actually, back then it wasn't called Verizon; it was called CMP Telephone. And so we're meeting with the customer, and the customer, he was talking to us about what needed to be done, and he's slinging around all these terms. I was like, I'm thinking in my head, am I stupid? I don't know. What is he talking another language? So when the meeting got done, I built somewhat of a rapport with this guy because we found we had some similar hobbies. And I said to him, what were all those things and he goes, what do you mean? I said, you called that an IDF? What's an IDF? I go, oh, it's an independent distribution frame. And then I said, yeah, because you kept using all these acronyms. I said, I don't know what any of that stuff is. It's like another language. I said, is there a dictionary? He goes, why, yes, there is. So there's actually a dictionary that you can get. If you go to your whole Google machine and you type in Bixby dictionary, you'll find that Bixby has an ICT terminology handbook. And you can go in and I was actually able to, I don't know if they meant for it to be free, but I came across where it was actually a PDF file. And I'm pretty sure it was on it was www.bixby.org. So, great way, especially for new people. So look that up, and then heck, with smartphones nowadays, you can actually save that to your smartphone, right? So that's very cool. It helps you to learn all those new things. So the next question, Anna from Las Vegas sent me an email. She said, hey, Chuck, what's encircled flux and fiber cable? That's a good one. That's a really good one. So encircled flux is just a fancy way of saying how much light there is inside in a predetermined circle within that core. That's all encircled flux really is. But in order to really cover what that is, again, I don't want to assume that everybody on this webinar here knows exactly what that is, what a fiber strand is. You know what? I got a graphic I can pull up. Let me pull up that graphic real quick. Because I actually had to do a one-on-one training session for somebody, and I made this graphic for them. So here we go. Here we see a fiber optic core. So a piece of fiber. You see that white area in the middle. That's called the core. The core has a very high index of refraction, which means light travels through it very easily. That's why, and so that's when you shine a light on the end of the fiber, it takes that light. Think of it as like a conduit, or where you can just send stuff down it. What's surrounding that darker gray is called the cladding. It has a low index of refraction. So what that does is it acts like a mirror. We call that internal reflection. So when that light goes down the core, it's bouncing as it goes down the core, and because it's hitting the cladding, and the cladding is acting like a mirror, it's keeping that light on the core. Even if you go around the corner, if you go around the bend or you turn to go up floors, as long as you don't exceed the bend radius, that light will continue on and go down that core. So that's how a fiber strand works. Now let's take that away and let's talk about encircled flux. I'm going to pull up another graphic. This one's probably going to cover my face a little bit, but that's okay. So here you see 3 fiber strands. All right, the first one I want to talk about is the one all the way on the left where it says correct. Now you'll see the gray cladding, and then that red is indicating the light source. So underneath that light source is actually the core. So the light source matches the size of the core. That's perfect. That's going to be a good signal. But you can have what's called underfilled or overfilled conditions. So, for example, if you take and I'm going to borrow this from Shotzi because him and I were just talking about this. So if you got a conduit and then you shoot a rifle, not shoot a rifle, but you take a rifle and you shoot a single bullet, not the cartridge, but the bullet down the conduit, that's just one mode of light going down. And there's lots of room around it. And so if you take a shotgun and shoot down, there's multiple modes of light going down that. So what happens is we have both LED lights sources and VCSELs, vertical cavity surface emitting lasers. So what happens is that light floods the end of that end face. So some of that light hits the cladding, some hits the core. So if it's underfilled, like it's shown here, I mean the entire light is going down the core. There's none that hit the cladding. What you're going to get is what's called an optimistic test result. The test result will actually be better than the actual performance of the fiber strand. For example, if you have a multi-mode fiber and you put a single mode launch cord on it, you'll get an optimistic result because when you put the correct multi-mode fiber patch cord, you'll notice that test rating is going to change. It's actually going to go down a little bit. That's because it's an optimistic test result. If it's an overfill, you get what's called a pessimistic test result. So what happens is you see that that's the graphic all the way over here. Let me see if I can do this. There we go. That one right there. Hey, new trick right there. Ding, 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 ding. That's a pessimistic. So the whole entire interface was lit up with the light source. So some of the light goes down the core, but some goes down the cladding. So you're losing some of the power source going down that. So encircled flux is literally just describing how much light's going down that core, but you need to understand underfilled and overfilled because that will definitely affect your test results. By the way, I read a really great article. I read actually it was last week or the week before. I think it was the week before. So it was actually an article by Chris Rollinson of FOC, Fiber Optic Center, if I remember right. Yeah, Chris Rollinson, Fiber Optic Center. There you go. That's what it was. Do a Google search on that. He's got a great little article on it. It's not a really long one. It's only going to take you let me turn that thing off. It's only going to take you a few minutes to read that. So the next question it's from Rick in Springfield. Let me turn off go back over to the comments. Rick from Springfield. He says, Chuck, what's the best way to determine how much cable is actually needed for a project I am estimating? That's a good question. These are all good questions today. I love great questions. So what he's typically referring to, you might hear people call it a takeoff or a rake off. So an estimator gets submitted. They can estimate a couple of different ways. They can either go out to the job site and do the actual visit, which a lot of times is not available because the building's not built yet. Majority of the time, they're given a set of prints. And then what they're going to do is they're going to do the takeoffs off those prints. Now, it doesn't matter if that person's a project manager or an estimator. They got to figure out how much cable is going to be needed for the project because they got to figure out how much material and labor is going to be needed because the labor is directly tied to the material component. The more material, the more labor you need. So it's kind of important that you get that right. So there's a couple different ways. So first, what you want to do is you want to come up with your point-to-point measurements, right? And that's where you measure from where the drop is to where the telecom room is. Now, there's two different ways, two different trains of thought on how to do this. And which one you use depends on two factors. How much time do you have? And how important is it that you're accurate? As an estimator, you don't always have all the time in the world because sometimes you're going to be estimating 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 projects at a time, all at different stages, all managing them with emails and RFQs all flipping around. Your head's just being spun around. So if you have time, the best way to do is take your digital scale or your digital ruler and measure each run. Now, what I would do is I would take the floor plans and I would cross-reference them to the electrical prints to make sure that the hallways that I'm going to use aren't being used by the electricians. I would draw a line down those hallways on my print, and I would use that as my path, and I would measure right from the TR to each drop, and I would put that number in a spreadsheet, and I would total them all up. Right? That is the most accurate way to do your point-to-point measurements. And it's good that you highlight them that way, because that way if you win the project and you switch it over to operations, you can give them the print, say, look, here's how I measured the runs. So that way they can make sure to mimic those runs when they're out in the field. Because if they choose a different hallway, you might need more cable. That's more material. And if you need more material, that's more labor. And if you documented that as part of the estimating process, that your takeoffs were based on these prints, dated, revision, whatever, and you give them a copy of the cable pathways, you have the foundation for a potential change order. There you go. So remember, it's all about documentation. I've said that several times. Documentation, and documentation. Those are the most important things ever. So if you have time, that's the most accurate way to do that. But like I said, most estimators don't have a whole bunch of free time. So then you can also do what's called averaging. Now, averaging takes less time, but it's also not the most accurate. So what you're going to do is you're going to find 5 of the longest runs on that floor and then 5 of the shortest runs on that floor. And you're going to measure them. And then you're going to average out those 2. And then you're going to multiply that number by the total number of cables you're installing on that floor. So that gets you the first half. So that after the first half, now what you're going to have to do is, remember, because you measured from point to point, now you got to add in the footage to drop down the wall at the work area outlet and drop down the wall inside the telecom room and any potential slack loops that they want. So you got to add that all in times the number of drops that you have. And then you'll put that in your spreadsheet, and then you'll put in your labor factors to figure out how much labor to put aside on that. Now, a word of caution here. Make sure that you're aware of how tall the ceilings are, right? So if you're doing, like, for example, doing an estimate for like an automotive dealership, right? Well, the cables out in the back, in the bays, those things aren't going to be dropping, 9 feet. There's 20-foot ceilings. So you have to go up to go to the back of the warehouse and then back down again. So you got to keep that kind of stuff in mind when you're doing those kinds of things, because you'll end up running out of that. Here's another tip for you. So if you're an estimator, and I did have my estimating rule out here earlier, but I put it away already. My day's over with. Make sure that you look at your prints and make sure you look at this, find out what scale they are, and make sure you set your scale to the same scale that the print is, because if you don't, your estimates are going to be totally wrong. Now, if it says it's 1/8 scale, set your digital meter. There's actually 2 different ways. They got rulers and they got the little digital scales with the wheels. Set up for 1/8, and then on top of that, then what you're going to do is you're going to take that and you're going to measure a doorway, a standard doorway, not a double or anything weird, just a standard doorway. They're 3 feet. So that way you can double check to make sure that your scale or your ruler is measured, is set exactly to that print. Ask me how I learned that tip. These bits of wisdom I'm giving to you are there's usually a story behind them where I messed something up, right? So always double check your measurements to make sure that it's right. And the one thing I like about those digital scale things as well is you can actually customize them. So if you don't know, if the prints came to you and you know that they are scale prints, but they didn't put what the scale is, you can actually do a custom off of that. So if you know the doorway is 3 feet, you can measure the 3 feet and tell your digital scale master, oh, this is 3 feet. But it's going to be more accurate, though, if you take a known distance, right? So let's say that you did a walkthrough on the job site and you know for a fact that it's 20 feet between columns. You measured it. It's 20 feet between columns. So when you got your prints, right, if you measure 20 feet with your digital scale master and you customize it to that will be more accurate than if you're trying to customize the 3-foot thing in the print. So the longer the measurement, the more accurate your digital scale master will be. Wow, where'd that 30 minutes go? Holy cow. I love doing these things. You guys hit me with a bunch of great questions all the time. I love doing these things. So I'll give you a few minutes before I go ahead and sign off, because we're at 30 minutes. But any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want me to respond back to? It's going to help the ICT industry better. I'll give you guys a minute or two. While you're doing that, I'm going to take another sip of my ginger ale. No questions? Oh, okay. Well, if you think of one after we log off, it always happens to some people because usually right after a show, I usually get a flurry of comments and questions. Email them to me, chuck@letstalkcabling.com, or you can look me up on LinkedIn, send me a question through direct message. And if you're one of the lucky few and you know who you are, you have my phone number. Shoot me a text message. So until next time, everybody, be safe. And I'll see you next Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
That's it for this episode of today's podcast. We hope you were able to learn something. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Also, leave a rating so we can help even more people learn about telecommunications. Until next time, be safe.